Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan Grech, and on today's episode, I've got an auxiliary fuel tank that I'll be installing into my Jeep Gladiator. So if you want to learn all about the whys and the whats and the specific tank that I've chosen, stick around, I'll get into all the details right now. So as you just saw, I took this thing out of the box and I'm extremely impressed with how it was packed and how well everything was laid out. It's all organized in these kind of vacuum sealed plastic bags. There's an inventory, there's quality control stickers. I'm already impressed. So what have I got? Let's back up a little bit. This is an auxiliary fuel tank made by a company called Out of Town 4-Wheel Drive. And the tank is called the Long Ranger. And this is specifically made for the Jeep Gladiator. Mine is a gas engine or petrol, and this is a 70-litre tank, which is about 18.5 gallons. So this is an auxiliary tank. The main tank stays exactly where it is, the factory tank, and this basically bolts right next to it, basically between the drive shaft and the exhaust over on the American driver's side, or here in Australia, it's the passenger side of the vehicle. So once I install this tank, I basically have two fuel tanks for a combined capacity of just over 150 litres, which is right around 40 gallons. So with that, I'm easily going to be able to drive over 1,000 kilometres, over 600 miles. With the mileage I've been getting lately, it should be more like 700 or 800 miles, about 1,200 kilometres. So that'll be great because I am intending to drive some of the most remote roads in the entire world. So before I install this tank, I want to run over the features and the reasons why I've chosen this one specifically. Here in Australia, there are a few different brands to choose from, and I think this one, the Long Ranger, it is the clear standout for quite a few reasons. And if you stick with me, you'll see why I have chosen this. So you can see, first of all, the tank is made from steel and it has got seam sealer on all the brackets and then this undercoat to protect it from rust. So this is really high quality made. It's all laser cut, it's all CNC machined and then welded together. The tank itself, you can see, has heat shields built in already to shield it from the exhaust in the places where that's required. And then obviously there's a spot for the fuel sender to measure the depth. There's the inlets, there's the outlets, all of that kind of thing. And because this is specifically designed for the Jeep Gladiator, there's bracketry and there's bolts and there's U-bolts and things like that to pick up all of the factory mounting locations. So I'm not going to be drilling holes in my Jeep. I don't have to cut the exhaust out of the way or anything like that. So reason number one that I chose this tank, it requires no modifications to the Jeep at all. It works perfectly with the original exhaust system and everything like that. Second, and add to that, is that it doesn't hang any lower than anything already under the frame. So in terms of off-roading, in terms of dragging this thing on the ground, this tank will sit exactly the same height as the factory tank. So I'm not changing any of the capabilities of my Jeep by adding this tank. So again, it just works really well with a stock Gladiator and requires the minimum of modifications. And I really love that because it means I can install it myself here in Dad's garage. It does say it would make it easier if I had a hoist or a lift so I could get the Jeep up in the air. I don't have one. I'm just here, I'm a backyard installer, so I'll do it all myself and I'll bring you along so you can see how it goes. When I started researching auxiliary tanks, I quickly went down the rabbit hole of what do they like to actually use. And that's where one of the main features of the Long Ranger that I like really shines, and that is their dual filler approach. So this is supplied as part of the kit, and so when you're at the gas pump or the petrol pump, you put the nozzle in and you can choose whether you fill the main tank or whether you fill the auxiliary tank. And it's entirely up to you because you can put the nozzle on the left or the right. So there's a million different scenarios here where you could completely fill the main and put nothing in the augs. You could do it the other way around. You could fill one of them half and then the other one full. You could fill both of them half. There's a million different ways, but the thing is, you're in control of which one is how full at all times. It's not like you have to fill the main and it's just gonna overflow into the auxiliary. That's not how it works at all. I get to completely choose at all times which one am I putting fuel into, and obviously I can just stop putting it in there whenever I like. And you might wonder why you would want to do some of those scenarios, and a future feature is going to show that to you. So when it comes to actually using the fuel that's in the auxiliary tank, you need to transfer it from the auxiliary tank into the main. And again, the Long Ranger, I think, really shines in this regard. It has a small switch that I'm going to mount on the dash, and this also shows the level of the fuel in the auxiliary tank. There's a sending unit, and so it knows how full the tank is. Obviously, super helpful to know how much fuel is actually in your tank. And then when you're ready, you basically just press this little button here, and their whole automated sending unit and everything will transfer the fuel from the augs into the main, and it will turn itself off, completely automated, when it's finished transferring. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to remember to turn it off or anything like that. And you can do this while the vehicle's in motion if you want, or you could do it while you're sitting on the side of the road. It's completely up to you. So I think, again, that's a really nice option, that you're in control of transferring the fuel. And if you wanted to as well, you can just transfer some of it and then turn it off with the same switch, and it won't continue to transfer. So again, you're in control. How much fuel's in the augs, how much fuel is in the main, it's totally up to you. So how does it actually do that transfer? That's another feature that I think is really great. It uses a small electronic transfer pump, and this is actually made in New Zealand, and super high quality durable unit. But the real standout feature here is that when you install it, you install an inline fuel filter on the inlet of that pump. And this has a whole bunch of benefits. So what this means is, before the fuel goes from the augs tank into the main, it will pass through this filter. So not only is that going to protect the little transfer pump, but it's also going to protect your whole vehicle and the whole Jeep, its fuel pump and the engine and everything. So I heard a story, a guy got one of these tanks and he actually drove it across Russia and all of Central Asia. And whenever he thought maybe the fuel was of questionable quality, he would intentionally only fill the auxiliary tank. Then he would wait for it to transfer from the auxiliary into the main, because then he knew it was going through the filter, and then he would fill the auxiliary again, because then later it would move across as well and go through the filter. So having this little filter is just another nice way to ensure that you're getting clean fuel before it goes into your main tank and then into the rest of your vehicle. Because of course, it's better to make a $5 filter dirty than it is either your in-tank pump or some part of your fuel injection system. So I really like that they've incorporated this small fuel filter. I think it's a really great feature. The next thing to me that shows this is a really well thought out kit is that it includes a second Evap canister or evaporative canister for the fuel vapors. And so this is law. When you're adding an additional tank, you must add extra capacity for the fuel vapors. And so the way the plumbing works, this bracket actually goes under the existing Evap canister, and this one's going to slot right up on top. So it's actually way up high, out of harm's way. Again, nothing's going to hang lower than factory, and you plumb this into the existing Evap canister, so you're basically increasing the capacity of the whole evaporative system to remain emissions compliant. Again, I want to make sure my vehicle is road legal and good for the environment. I don't want to deal with the hassle of breaking any laws, or if I ever have to make an insurance claim and it's found out that I've done something illegal. They're all things I'm not interested in. I want to have a quality product that's actually legal to have on the road. So adding an Evap canister for me is a must. You can see too, laid out in front of me here is all of the pieces of the kit. So it's really comprehensive. It comes with all of the wiring loom that you need, all the connectors and crimps. It comes with a ton of different fuel hoses that all have a different purpose and go to a different place. And then there's a whole bag of clamps and bolts and nuts to actually secure it and put it all together. And of course, a kit this comprehensive, it needs to have good installation instructions, and it definitely does. These are full color photos of actual install, and they've been annotated with arrows and diagrams, and really comprehensive step by step. You know, now install the breather hose from this point to that point, doing up the hose clamps at each end. Now run the wiring above the cross member to the left of the drive shaft, so on and so forth. So again, I'm not a professional installer. I don't have a lift. I'm not going to have the Jeep in the air. I'm just going to do all of this here in Dad's garage with simple hand tools. Yes, the kit is totally doable for an ordinary person in their garage. While I'm on the topic of fasteners too, I have to remove the whole inner fender liner from this rear wheel so I can get access to all the factory plumbing for the filler. And to do that, you have to kind of get out all of these plastic clips. That is how Jeep holds everything together. And to show you how comprehensive this kit is, they actually include those plastic clips. They're basically like rivets that are just plastic. And then so of course you need a tool to actually do them up. Well, they supply that tool as well. So when I'm finished, this fender liner will go back on and it'll look 100% factory. Nobody will know that it's ever come off. Again, another feature that I really like. Moving on to the actual tank itself now, you can see this thing is custom made to take advantage of all the space available. And this is the orientation that it sits in the vehicle. That is actually the front and this is the rear. And so because of all these different shapes and kind of contours, there's different breather hoses that go to make sure you don't get air bubbles trapped anywhere in these high points. And of course, it's all been designed and thought out really well. Part of the tank as well is that it has these built-in heat shields everywhere that's necessary, along the side to protect it from the exhaust, and then at the back here, it protects it from the muffler that's kind of hanging out in that spot a little bit near the spare wheel right here at the back of the Gladiator. The tank too also has a drain plug on the bottom, which I don't think many auxiliary tanks have, but I think is a really good feature to have. So again, you're out in the middle of Russia. It is possible that you get very bad quality fuel and you might just want to dump it out. It also is not impossible to actually get the wrong fuel. I know it caused huge controversy here in Australia. A remote station was selling diesel and a whole bunch of people put it in their diesel vehicles. And it turned out it wasn't actually diesel, it was unleaded fuel and they got mixed up. And so a lot of people had trouble. It either damaged their engine or they couldn't get it out of their tanks. And of course, having a drain plug too, you could just drain some fuel out of this thing, put it in a jerry can and then give it to a friend who isn't so fortunate to have an auxiliary tank. So I think a drain plug also is another really nice to have feature. And then on the bottom side, we can see the reinforcing that has been done on this tank. Obviously, if you drive a Jeep, you're probably going to scrape this thing along the ground at some point. So it's got this really thick reinforced steel bottom that wraps up the sides to keep it strong. And it isn't dead flat on the bottom either. It's got a little bit of a curve to it, some contours. That's going to add strength so that when you do inevitably scrape it on a rock, you're not going to have any problems. Furthermore, this tank does have internal baffling, which is going to stop the fuel from sloshing around inside of it. Because that amount of fuel, it's a significant amount of weight. And when you're off-roading, you're wallowing around in the rocks, you don't want the fuel to be sloshing from side to side or front to back. So having internal baffles, key feature to have on an auxiliary tank. So in terms of features of the actual tank and the whole setup, those are really the key reasons that I went with the Long Ranger. And then once I actually got to know the company and I started really researching it, I became even more confident that I was doing the right thing. So way back, I want to say it was in the 80s, but it might have actually been in the 70s, the Long Ranger made a deal and they're distributed here in Australia by ARB, one of the leading brands in the entire world for off-roading. So if ARB distribute this product, we already know that it's really high quality. And I looked into it. Since they've been distributed by ARB, this company has made over 100,000 auxiliary fuel tanks for vehicles. Because of course, they don't just make them for the Jeep Gladiator, they make them for nearly every vehicle you can imagine. Land Cruisers, Hiluxes, Rangers, the Ram 1500, tons of different vehicles. They make either an auxiliary tank like this one, or they even make full replacement tanks. So no doubt about it, these guys know what they're doing. Not only do they make a quality tank, they obviously provide the whole kit. They've been doing it for 100,000 times now, and they include really comprehensive instructions to make sure you're not going to run into trouble or kind of, be left not knowing what to connect to what. So again, this is all giving me confidence that this is the right auxiliary tank for me and for what I'm looking to do. So you can see this is an incredibly detailed kit and really well thought out design. And I'm super excited to get on to installing it. I've read through the instructions a few times now. I'm pretty confident I understand what needs to happen. I think it's all fairly straightforward. Probably the hardest part is going to be lying on my back and trying to actually push the tank up into place. And maybe I'll use my jack for that. Maybe I'll just use some wood blocks. I'm not actually sure. So I've just been organizing, I've been getting ready, and what I wanted to do was really highlight all of the features and the reasons why I've chosen this auxiliary tank. So if you do have any more questions or if you're wondering about certain things, don't hesitate, leave a comment down below. And for those of you wondering, yes, you can get this in North America. There are some guys in Canada who've been importing them, and the Long Ranger, they are trying to bring a deal to North America to have a more firm distributor. But I'll throw a link down in the description for where you can check these out in North America, and a link to the Long Ranger website as well. You can check out what they have available for your vehicle. So I hope that video has been helpful, and I hope that you've learned a thing or two about auxiliary tanks if it's something you've been considering. If it has been helpful, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss out. Next episode, I'll install this tank from start to finish, and then I'll actually go to the pump, I'll fill it up, and I'll use it, and I'll show you exactly what it all looks like. So until then, stay safe out there, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.